Okay, welcome to the Graph+AI panel on connecting data and adapting to an uncertain world. I don't think anyone here needs to be told that the world's become a whole load more uncertain over the last few years and few months. Lockdowns, even wars, are disrupting the way we've thought about and the preconceptions we've had about the way the world works, right? And that's affecting businesses all over, not just in supply chain, but in finance and all sorts of other things. As a result, companies are looking to adapt, and they're often looking to data increasingly to support that decision making they need to do in order to adapt. And that's requiring them to connect data together, perhaps they've never needed to do before. And most importantly, look beyond just what happened to what's the context of that? What's the cause of those things that I've seen? What action can I take? And I guess importantly, do I have the people to do this for me? And can I trust the information I've got? All these kind of questions are coming increasingly important. This panel, look, I'm incredibly excited about this panel. We've got three titans, I guess, of this new world, right? From governance through to data engineering and machine learning and skills, and I guess graph as well, right? So you're going to have some really different but important and connected views on how we're going to use data to adapt to an uncertain world. So I'm really looking forward to it. Without any more introduction, I'd love you to welcome our panel, and I'll get them to introduce themselves now, right? So how about we start with Stan?
Hey, this is Stan. Thanks for having me over, Harry. So Stan, one of the co-founders of Colibra. We call ourselves the system of engagement for the data asset, or in other terms, we sometimes talk about data intelligence, making sure that the right people can get connected to the right data, algorithms, insights, and outcomes. And for myself, I'm our company's chief data citizen, which is another way of saying our main persona, the chief data officer. I'm responsible for our own data office at Colibra, the data strategy, etc. And then ultimately, of course, drinking our own champagne, and happy to be here.
Welcome. Antoine.
Yes, hi, Antoine Amend, Technical Director for Financial Services at Databricks. Thanks so much for having us today, Harry. So Databricks is the cloud data and AI company. It's a platform where we bring all the tools, the capabilities, the provisioning on cloud for you to be able to unlock value from your data, wherever your data is on your cloud premises. And really that's by unlocking value, it means it's all the way from BI and MI dashboarding capability to more AI and ML use cases. So joined Databricks a couple of years ago from the industry as an industry practitioner. And my job is really to bridge the gap between a technical capability and a business use case. Hence the focus around financial services, ESG, sustainability, and all those great use cases.
Cool, thanks. Simon.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks for having me on this. My name's Simon Walker. I'm the co-founder of Kubrick Group. Kubrick really exists. The easiest way to describe Kubrick is we exist to help solve what we see as the digital skills emergency. So it's great having new technology coming into all these organizations, but if there's no one there to implement it, use it, change the culture of the workforce, then it becomes fairly redundant. So as Harry said at the beginning, we're very much in the skills business, and we create workforces. So we basically, what we see our role is we tear down the barriers that prevent people coming into the workforce. And that's also a diverse workforce that is super important for technology, and you hear a lot about. But we specialize in data management, data engineering, machine learning engineering, cloud engineering, and data product. And we create the next generation workforce in those.
Great. Well, I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find 3 faster growing companies in the data space than these 3. And I guess I've forgotten to introduce myself. I'm Harry Powell. I'm head of industry solutions at Graph+AI. And before that, I guess I was a data scientist. And in fact, I worked with Simon at JLR and Antoine at Barclays. So it's really great to have old friends and new around the table. Right, let's get started. So I want to talk about what your clients are talking to you about. I want to hear how your clients are talking about this speed of change, about this uncertainty. How are your clients being affected by events? What areas of their businesses are affected? What are they saying to you about it in the context of data? How about we start with Simon on that?
Oh, wow. Okay. I was just, as you can see, I was just collecting my thoughts. I mean, well, obviously, so I'm there from a workforce point of view, and I'm really sorry, I didn't want to mention it early on. I've got to mention COVID because it's, arguably whether we're still in it or not, depends how people view it. But that was interesting. So from our point of view, suddenly we had a number of clients that were on a journey of needing to redefine their business, but suddenly COVID accelerated that, and there was just to survive, they needed to redefine their business. And what came with that was analyzing their workforce. And I think actually, it isn't just let's have more data people. It's about data culture, having the right individuals on board. There is a number, and rightly so, there are a number of diversity issues that facing our industry at the moment. Our clients started to realize if they're going to grow, if they're going to start investing in their data teams, they can't have huge homogenous data teams because there'll be a massive inherent bias. They won't be as effective. They'll be asking the same questions of data. So a lot of our clients were coming to us going, look, we can't find the skills in the marketplace. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul. Everyone wanted the 3 years experience. There wasn't any because the industry was growing at such a pace. And equally, suddenly it was, we need diverse candidates. We need people that they're not just coming from computer science or maths. If there is a digital skills emergency, there's not enough people coming into the industry with through traditional routes or traditional degrees. So the biggest thing that I think our clients were saying was that actually the lack of the ability to hire their workforce and the right skills in and the right diversity. I think that was quite a nervous period for many of our clients. And we through COVID, the start of COVID, we were just under 500 people. We're now over 1,000 staff. So it gives a bit of an illustration in terms of what the demand was from our clients to need these individuals. And that also actually forced us to look at actually what more could we do as an organization to go out and find these pools of diverse talent that want to come into data.
And Antoine, you're speaking to clients every day, right, about this kind of stuff. You must have noticed that the need to adapt to the world around them more and more.
A bit, yes.
Only a bit. That's interesting.
In financial services, basically, speed of change is everything, right? When we think of risk management, when we think of fraud prevention, when we think of investment strategies or backtesting, it's all about how fast can we operationalize things. And I think it was not necessarily ideal, but it was okay for some time when the data was relatively small, when we were back on premises, when the world was kind of stable, right? And over the past 2 years, it's been exponentially changing in the way we see how data can give you, to your point before, Harry, that descriptive and predictive and prescriptive view of how to better navigate those risks. When something happens, we don't want to wait for end of week reports to tell us that something bad was happening, right? We need to be able to iterate faster, to run those what if scenarios, those ad hoc analyses, being able to backtest those trading strategies at massive scale and take those next right steps to mitigate that risk. So we've seen that over and over in many different aspects in FS, around capital markets, retail banking, moving to a completely digital economy, insurance, that's everywhere. So it's really fascinating to see those kind of challenges that we're solving now.
Yeah, and I guess in that what was initially a bit of a fad and a nice to have of digital transformation has become more and more kind of important. And I suppose when people do digital transformation, you guys at Collibra must be one of the earlier people they call, right?
Yes, indeed. I would agree with Simon's point, for example, on the skills. There's a lot of change, as you said, Harry. And inevitably, that comes with change in the business. It comes with change in technology, and people need to adapt, right? So digital transformation sort of got an acceleration 2 years ago, but continues to be a big topic that we see, and data is an inevitable portion of that. But next to that, you also see a lot of, or I hear a lot of talk about cloud, obviously. A lot of organizations are doing cloud migrations right now. That's a juggernaut, I would say, that started a few years ago and is continuing to accelerate. And then next to that, a few other topics that come up more and more become more important is privacy, for example, partially because there's more regulation about it, but also because people are more aware about it, I would say. And security, right? With what's going on in the world, security to a degree even becomes a national security problem, right? And then what you're also seeing, and what I'm also hearing a lot more, is what Antoine was mentioning in the beginning, ESG topics, right? So data is, there's a lot more regulation around, hey, show that your products and services are ESG criteria compliant. So you're seeing a lot more questions around, okay, how do we measure whether we're actually doing that? So you're seeing data more in the context of ESG as well. And overall, I would say one thing that I hear strongly, and I hear that voice becoming stronger and stronger, is that for data leaders out there, they're increasingly being challenged, show very clearly your value, right? So data monetization is increasingly becoming a topic as well.
Okay, cool. So we've got this, we've got these changes, right, in skills in data and all of that. And I guess that means that we're all talking to clients who know they need to change, right, and are thinking about structural changes, both in terms of their organization and in terms of the data. So what are they, when clients are talking to you, how are they looking to you to help them in that, right? What is it, and I guess particularly a lot of these things come down to connecting data together, right? We want to address these challenges, and everyone has data in different places, and I thought each of you would have an interesting perspective on that. When clients start this journey, they often talk about connecting data together, and be interested to hear the perspective you have again, Stan, on how is it you get engaged with these customers? What is it they talk to you about first in terms of trying to solve these problems?
When they come to us, there's a definite, very clear reason as to why they come to us, right? Because we're known for governance and catalog and quality and lineage and a whole bunch of things. So that's why they would typically come to us. But then when you look at what they're challenged with, it's often, how do I do this? Right? How do I get started working with this data in a proper way? The data as an asset idea, how do I do this? And once they've done something successful, it's more about, okay, what do I do next? Right? How do I make this, how do I continue to get this going? And ultimately it boils down to their objective being, I want to raise the awareness of data as an asset across the organization, right? I want everyone in the company to sort of wake up to data and know that data is important and it needs to be cared for and should be turned into value, etc. So when they come to us, it's more like, hey, we have an idea as to what we should do, but we need some help as to how we can get this done. And can you tell us how other customers are doing this? How are they making value out of data? And can you put us in touch with some other customers? All the classics you would expect. And as you can imagine, Harry, the topic that's increasingly coming up in those conversations is, hey, talk to me about this data mesh thing. What is this and how do I do that?
I guess they're talking to you about that, Antoine, as well, right? I mean, you guys are at the coal face, right, in terms of actually connecting this stuff together and building those sort of that structure.
No, completely. I think just coming back to the original question of why do a customer come to Databricks will be often those two angles. It's all AI and ML, and we need to be in the kind of innovation space. And there is all the more data engineering and plumbing, and we need to simplify our system. But at the end of the day, I love what Stan just said about those kind of data assets. How do you start accelerating those change by thinking of data differently, thinking of that reusability of data, those foundation that helps you get better and better over time. And that's critical in those cloud migration, because not every customer is full on cloud yet. So lots of legacy systems, you need to make sure that the system, the database and the mainframes happening are still on premises, and your world of cloud and data and AI somehow is connected. It shouldn't be all those complex, like different technologies. So people will effectively come from us from a data engineering or an AI or ML, but eventually we'll be working towards that digital transformation of thinking of that glue, or that kind of data foundation that helps you execute.
Because I mean, I guess to begin with, the glue is people, right? The glue is the understanding across the organization of how these different tables fit together and stuff. Increasingly, that's kind of 2 or 3 people in the background, right? You know, the 3 enterprise architects that understand the whole thing. And when people start a kind of a digital program, Simon, I guess that's a big problem for you guys coming in. How do you connect together just what people know, not just what's in the in the systems?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So I was just actually when I was listening to Antoine and Stan talking, one of the things that I thought actually is kind of the transformation that we've seen with clients. So if you go back 6 years ago, nearly everyone was proof of concepts and changed the company. So they were in, changed the company. And now you're watching organizations and industries, and it's interesting how they use Kubrick. So it's where are they in their data journey? So we have, for probably 3/4 of our life, we were set up in 2016 and started to trade in 2017. But we've been mainly changed the company. So it's been on transformation. And people are now as they're trying to put data as a culture, and they're valuing data assets, and this has got to become the fabric of their organization. It's interesting to see how they're turning to us for run the company. So what is it like for BAU? And from a skills perspective, I think one of the victims, if you like, or one of the consequences of moving so quickly with technology and data is they're bringing a lot of these new people in. And actually what's starting to happen, and it's a term that I've heard probably from 3 or 4 organizations, and they're terming it the frozen middle. And what it is it's people that have really, really valuable knowledge of the organization that could be the glue. And what's happening is there's an obsolescence in their skill sets. So they have all this valuable nature of the, all this valuable understanding of the organization and skills. Yet when they came in 10, 15 years ago, and they've moved up, so now they're also expensive. They don't necessarily have the technical skills or technical understanding. So you're starting to hear this term, and I think we're going to hear it more and more, is the frozen middle. So one of the things that we're trying to do, and albeit on a very small scale at the moment, but we're seeing, can we actually start getting career pivoters and bring them back into the workplace equipped with these skills, because they can do exactly what you're saying. They're then the glue, and that's the run the company, not just all the transformation piece. So I think we're in, and also it just as another side, it disproportionately affects diversity. So a lot of women, for example, came into the organization in non-technical roles, but now they're becoming victims of this transformation. So actually, I think we'll start hearing more and more clients coming to us going, look, we've done a lot of the transformation. We're running the organization now. We now want to start pivoting individuals that have knowledge. Now, it might not be for their own company, but I think you'll start seeing more and more of that.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, so we've kind of heard a number of thoughts about connection, actually, right? So you've talked about connecting the glue of people. We've talked about, Antoine's actually physically connecting data in the cloud, and Stan's talking about accessibility and can you trust the data? Do you understand what it is? These are all elements of bringing data together. And of course, people have always talked about connecting data. Can you guys see your clients doing things with disconnected data that they couldn't do before? Things that are that actually rely on their ability to connect this stuff that they couldn't have done when it was in silos. Start with Antoine on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a first stab at it. We mentioned ESG. ESG for me is a perfect example of something that simply wouldn't happen in isolation. To understand how sustainable a specific company is, to understand how ethical a specific organization is, you need to be able to bring data from various different places. And it's not just a simple report or a simple disclosure or a simple rating from an agency that will tell you how sustainable that investment is you being able to start bringing news feeds, social media, all the way to scraping pollution data above factories somewhere. But that contextualization of information and that linkage is what makes that actionable insights. So I think it's more and more critical to start bringing new type of information and linking those information to take informed decision, rather than just solely relying on that table or that database that was built for that specific purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of see that. People have always talked about connecting data together and haven't actually really done it, except in the last, 5 years. And I guess that project, that in some sense is one of the things that Stan, that Collibra is about, right? Is when you start connecting data and pulling it from all sorts of places and putting it in different places, people need to be able to know kind of where it is and what it means, right?
Absolutely. Now, my brain is still stuck on that frozen middle, Simon. I'm all of a sudden thinking about, ice cream.
Well, to me, it sounded like a microwave meal. Whenever I do that, you end up with a frozen middle, don't you?
Exactly. No, but indeed, if you think about what's happening, right? Insurance companies are offering new types of services, financial services. Manufacturing companies are digitally transforming and adding value, providing value-added services on top. And all of that is coming through data and having it connected, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud. It doesn't really matter. It's now together and you can do something with it. But I think one of the biggest problems that organizations still have is that they're hiring people, for example. They're hearing about AI and ML, and they want to do that too, right? To offer new services. So they hire a data scientist, a PhD in physics, who manages to speak with the business, let's say. And the first thing that happens when they come in an organization is there's like, okay, where is the data, right? Because to Antoine's point earlier, very often all that data is still very siloed, and there's not even a place where that fancy data scientist can start searching for the data that exists in that organization, let alone bring it together. So very oftentimes, a lot of the work that these people are doing is just, digging like a pig for truffles, trying to find the data that's out there in the first place before they can connect it. And once it's connected, then they can provide their, machine learning stuff and data product stuff. So I think a lot of organizations are still at the stage where they're, trying to, get a catalog together of their data asset that's out there, so they can offer it to those value-add people who can then spend their time on actually doing something with the data. I think, Harry, you said it's only now that we've started connecting data, and to a certain point that's true, but in a way we've been connecting data since, I don't know, since the 90s, right? And data warehouses and data lakes and data platforms. Sometimes I wonder, you know, are we reinventing our industry every 10 years in a way, right?
Well, yeah, we are. It's the only way of keeping it fun, right? The got to do something new. I mean, it's kind of it's you know, this whole thing of because on the one hand, Stan, yeah, people wanting to know where the data is, what it means, how it all fits together, and you know, that sounds like obviously a good thing. I mean, the danger is that people go down a master data management kind of rabbit hole and try and kind of create perfect data. And then on the other hand, Simon, I'm guessing when your guys land a new client, people are saying, never mind that really. Where's the value? How do you get the value out quickly?
Well, yeah, and I've got to say, just something that Stan said that really reminded me about when we first set Kubrick up. Actually, we went, you know, typical startup. We did our research in terms of what the clients need. And actually, I think the scary thing was, because it was pretty petrifying, because we bet the farm on Kubrick, and 2 kids, second wife.
You bet your kids and your wife as well.
Pretty much. Well, they would say, yeah. I mean, she would say I did, yeah. But so it kind of it was a bit like Cortez burning his ships. You know, there was no other choice. But the interesting thing was, when we were speaking to clients, and this was the petrifying bit, just everyone kept on talking about, like, no, you want data, we need data scientists. But we knew there was nothing for them to analyze. You know, you had organizations, some more than 100 years old, that had merged with, you know, 20 or 30 businesses. You knew that there was no way, there was nothing for them to analyze. They'd be spending their lives doing data engineering. So actually, we took the plunge completely against what everyone was telling us to do, of like, no, you need to produce a load of data scientists. And we decided that we should do data engineering. But it was months of sleepless nights, really, of thinking, had we done the wrong thing? And that was the whole point, was our guys have got to go in there and start connecting the data and start, you know, giving a platform for the data scientists then to actually come along and do the smart stuff. But yeah, it really did remind me back in those somewhat dark days. Yeah, I can imagine. And that balance between you know, creating those data sets, doing that data engineering, and getting on and using them is I guess, in some sense, the balance that all 3 of you strike, and one that's pretty much day to day for the guys using Databricks, I guess. Because you're the guys coming out with machine learning models that make the money and data engineering behind them.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking of this, because when we say connecting the data, there is also the connecting the insights back. When we think of just AI as that side desk activity, when nothing really comes out, is what is innovative is not how smart your model is how you can bring that model part into that data picture, that equation, for people to take the right decision. So I think there's connecting platforms, there's connecting data, connecting insights, connecting people.
I mean, one thing that I think about a lot between analytics and I guess the kind of thing we're doing now and thinking about Graph, I might even pull this conversation back to Graph, who knows, right? Is analytics has kind of been great at observing things, of noticing things. You know, your margin's gone up by 10% or down by 10% or whatever, and got better and better at doing that at scale and reliably and all that kind of stuff. But it never seems to have made a whole load of improvement in terms of context. You know, is that good or is that bad? How do I work out what the other comparable information should be? And in terms of kind of causation, you know, we're still kind of caught in that correlation versus causation thing and all of that. And then in terms of action, right, where you actually, you know, what do I do with this thing, right? How do I actually take it and do something with it? And those 3 things, I think, are at the core of how we adapt to an uncertain world. We need to be quickly able to work out not just, you know, this has changed, but is that good or is that bad? What's caused it, and what do I do as a result? which I think is where graph becomes interesting, right? I'd love to hear from each of you what's your response to that, right? Because in some sense that's a challenge to analytics as an industry right now, this kind of context, cause and action thing, and the ability to adapt. Can conventional analytics rise to that challenge? I'm going to stay with Antoine. He's smiling a little bit. You know what? When people just everyone's trying to keep a straight face. Don't ask me first. But he broke, and I'm going to get it fired at Antoine.
I'm trying to get my thought together. But no, you're right. It's you're making an excellent point. It's not necessarily again how smart your model is how do you understand and the business value and the business context around that model for you to act upon. So coming back to connecting people, clearly we cannot have an organization where there are 3 levels of middle frozen layer in between data scientists and a domain expert who understand that context. We need to be able to bring them together. But the truth is they don't speak the same language at all. One is not technology at all. The other one does not necessarily understand the nitty-gritty of the business they're operating. So how do you effectively connect people, even though they may not speak the same language? But this is for me where what I love with technology. Technology could be here as almost that translation mechanism, that kind of Rosetta Stone between an engineer and a data scientist who one loves Scala and Java, the other one loves Python, and they don't understand each other. But they can still work on the same platform. How do you bring the domain expert who can bring the context, who only know BI and MI dashboards? Why do they have to stay on a different database and on a different dashboard somewhere else, but bring them part of that kind of triumvirate on a same collaborative environment? So I think technology, it's not a technology problem, it's a business and processes and people's problem, but technology can help to create that kind of connection.
And of course, Stan, one of the ways of creating those connections is looking at who's looking at the same data, right? In other words, if I'm looking at a piece of data and a colleague looks at the same piece of data, in some sense we're connected, right? That must be a big use case for the kind of way that you look at the world.
Absolutely, absolutely, and exactly to Antoine's point, you need to make sure that these people, when they look at the same data, they're also interpreting it in the same way, right? When they see this piece of data, do they mean the same thing? And when they see that metric on the dashboard, are they going to interpret that in the same way and know what that metric means? But I like your question, Harry, about the conventional analytics, right? Can conventional analytics do everything that we need to be able to do today? And I think to a degree it'll fall short. If you look at what's happening, there's a lot of work or analytics being done on the basis of time series, for example, to identify behavioral patterns, let's say. But then on the other hand, I'm also a big fan of the graph, because a lot of the things that new data allows us to do, Antoine, like you said, social media and feeds from everywhere. A lot of the analysis that you have to do, like for example, Harry, let's say that we need to identify how far away are we in some data set from each other, right? And then the graph offers all sorts of interesting algorithms. I forget their exact name, but nearest neighbor and all of that stuff, which a graph allows you to analyze. That if you would have to do it in conventional analytics, you're going to be spending a lot of time rewriting that algorithm essentially to come to that analysis.
Yeah, I mean, so time series has been a conventional way of thinking about causation, right? Because the arrow of time imposes some sort of restriction on when information can be created, and therefore you can sort of see cause. But graph can do the same thing. And Stan, I'm super grateful for you to moving us onto the topic of graph, right? Because I guess that's my sort of area, right? And that's brilliant. Yeah. Because I see the kinds of information that that you guys are storing, that you guys are creating in Calibra as a graph, right? And there's about a way of seeing how information percolates through an organization is a really interesting way of understanding that organization, right? And understanding who knows what and who should know what, right? The question of what is there out there you should know, but you don't know? What reports should you be looking at, but you don't look at? And the way that people interact is an interesting thing on that. I know you're all kind of aware of graph technology, and I'm going to throw this one open a little bit. I'd love to know from your point. So we've talked about connected data, and you know that I feel that graph might be an interesting part of that, and context, cause, and action. Be really interested to hear from you guys how you think graph could be part of your world, right? And how that can, how graph thinking can start becoming, or perhaps already is, integrated into the way that your users, interact with your products.
I can probably start. So I'll start with the very simple view, and then it can become.
Is that why you got in first, Simon? You thought if I get in with a simple view.
That's right, and then it can become more complex. So maybe I'll look good with association. So it's quite. So what graphing does for us, it's quite interesting, because when I was listening, I think it was Antoine that was talking about being able to communicate through the group. You hear a lot about data translators and things like that. And, we had, in the last 12 months, Kubrick have had 45,000 applicants. So somehow we've got to get 45,000 applicants, and we've got to understand, which ones are going to cut the mustard. I wouldn't say we've got that completely down pat. We're good at knowing the 2.5% we hire are good, but there's probably more, but nonetheless. But one of the things we talk about their questioning skills. And really what we are testing is their ability to ask why and understand what the purpose is of something. And it's quite interesting watching our guys working with Tiger Graph as well, because what it allows them to understand is the value of relationships between two data points. So they start understanding it's not just one simple hierarchy, but there is a complexity to it, and it gives them context. It gives them, they can decipher business meaning. And I think that's what allows really Kubrick to find the people that are good. So, data translators or whatever the term is, but really what they're doing is what's the point of this? Why is it valuable? What's its value in relation to everything else? And I think that's how we use it. And it's actually how we select the people that we choose to join Kubrick Group.
Interesting. So we're basically a filtering mechanism for your HR department.
Well, no, I mean, not, there's an element to it.
Yeah. So Antoine, I know we discussed this sort of stuff in New York the other day. Graph, I mean, doesn't have to be Tiger Graph, right? How does graph come into your world? And I'm guessing people seem to be talking about it more and more.
Yeah. I think genuinely that graph is everywhere, whether we use a graph database or graph technology or not. But when you think, or Stan mentioned that data lineage, that data ownership, for instance, that's a graph. When we think of acyclic graph for how a code needs to be executed, that's a graph. When we think of those business processes and connected steps, those are all graphs. But what we've seen is that shift, exactly to Simon said, of now asking different type of questions, now thinking of those kind of what if, or those relationships that were hidden from all those kind of graphs that now brings industries and businesses towards thinking of that business problem as the graph. I think it started from an investigation perspective, from AML and fraud, of thinking, because naturally an investigation, you need to start physically connecting those entities. And we're seeing that more and more towards linking those concepts together and being able to risk propagate your score, for instance, or risk in risk management. So I think we're seeing that shift. It started from, use cases that were initially always interpreted as a graph, and now that's more becoming mainstream of leveraging more than just investigation, leveraging, I say, technical metadata, business metadata, thinking of how those different concepts may be linked together, and therefore that propagation or that risk propagation or those what if scenarios or different things.
And Stan, do you see graph coming into your world?
Well, Harry, exactly like you said it earlier, right? For us in our software, in what we do, there is a lot of graph, right? Because you're looking at, let's say, technical audiences who look at, schemas and columns and tables, etc., that then go, as Antoine said, through lineage, and they transform into some data set in the warehouse, and then it's connected to metrics and policies and rules and domains, and all of that for us is one big graph. We sometimes refer to it as the metadata graph, or the data asset graph, or the data intelligence graph. I think for organizations, if they think graph, very often they'll end up in the social media platforms or a Google who talks about their knowledge graph. And I think that any organization would benefit from having their enterprise knowledge graph, right? And being able to sort of query that to say, okay, what's happening in my business? What's happening in my organization? That would be like a dream, ideal target state for a lot of organizations. And that's why I'm excited about the advancements that are coming out in the technology that allows you to manipulate and store and query the graphs like you're providing.
Cool. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of time here. Sorry, I had a spider on my computer. People don't normally mention that in panels, but I thought it was worth sharing. We're coming towards the end of our time here, and I feel like we've sort of explored around this thing of how people are trying to use data increasingly to be able to adapt, and that connecting data is sort of interesting. And we have these challenges around people, around kind of engineering, around governance. I'd really like to thank you all for being part of that. I'd certainly like to encourage anyone watching this to check out the firms that you've heard from here. Databricks, Calibra, Kubrick, and Tygraph, because I think we all have something interesting to add to this conversation around being able to adapt in uncertain times. And with that, as I say, I'd like to thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. Thanks.
Indeed. Thanks for having us over. Have a nice day, everyone.